Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be discussing a hot topic, one that's not new or unique to our industry, but one that you need to solve for in order to grow your business now and into the future. My name is Michelle Turner, and I'm your host for today's session. Today we'll hear from two specialty contractors on how they're leveraging Procore to improve cash flow, specifically as it relates to controlling labor costs and getting paid for extra work. It's our goal to ensure everyone walks away with a better understanding of why and how Procore's financial solutions can be a key part of your cost management strategy. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that throughout Groundbreak, we'll be sharing some really cool new features that aren't generally available. Please make sure that you're making purchasing decisions based on what is available today. You can read the full text of this slide on our website. So let's begin. If you think about cash flow as water flowing through a pipe, what do you think is the blockage preventing it from flowing smoothly? Feel free to throw your comments in the chat, but to give you a few examples of the many, there are late submissions, chasing down payments, payment disputes, limited visibility and coordination for billing, and all of these things can lead to tighter margins, longer cycles, ineffective cash management, resulting in poor or negative cash flow. So in order to improve cash flow, you first need to think about what's in and out of your control. And by doing so, you can identify ways to address or remedy the situation. So let's talk about what's out of your control. First is client behavior, from their deadlines to their payment styles. These are out of your control. Yes, you can learn to predict behavior and work around their styles, but the best defense is a good offense, and we'll talk about that in a second. Second is supply chain. As we all experienced last year and still this year, we know that supply chains can be disrupted and there's nothing you can do when it happens. Third is human error. Until robots rule the planet, there's always going to be an element of human error. And this is an area that can kind of be massaged, but still never completely eliminated. So let's talk about what's in your control. The ones I'll be talking about today are process, procedure, and systems. First, process. For some folks, you might be dealing with late submissions, missing tickets, or missing information, which impacts your ability to bill. What you can control is the process to track and initiate payment for out-of-scope work as early and aggressively as possible. Second is procedures. Based on the National Construction Payment Report, 56% of the respondents said they don't fight for payment because they fear they're going to lose the customer. The best way to avoid a dispute is to track and validate everything. So the procedure is to be as thorough and detailed as possible in your paper trail. Lastly are systems. These are the digital solutions that enable your teams to do the two above. And without these, the two can fall victim to human error. Remember, I said this can be massaged? Digital solutions are your masseuse. And these three things are part of a larger whole, a better cost management strategy. McKinsey published a report this year that looked at effective cash management and discovered that the leaders who traditionally achieved this through inventory cycles and better credit terms changed their behavior. They adopted new processes and procedures to shorten their cash conversion cycle through digital solutions. It allowed them to be more efficient, get paid faster, and set up for success when things went sideways. So, what are the key objectives with the effective cost management strategy? Controlling your labor costs, getting paid faster, and getting paid for everything that you do. And all of that can impact positive cash flow. And these things are possible, or better yet, within your control with digital solutions like Procore. By connecting your project and accounting teams, both are able to make better decisions that impact cash flow. Procore can give your teams real-time insight into labor costs, changes in the field, requests for extra work, and all of this can sync to your ERP so you can ensure your costs and billings are accurate and up to date. And to give you some real-world examples, I'm now going to invite Brad and Gabe to share their stories. Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. I'd like to start with something that many of you might be thinking about or have dealt with in the past. You're losing money on jobs. In fact, there's probably a number of jobs where you lost money. But overall, the company is profitable. Why fix it if it's not broken, right? So the reason is because you're leaving money on the table. And that may not be a big deal when you have a lot of jobs that can make up for these losses, but you're not maximizing your cash flow by taking that approach. What happens when jobs are fewer and far between, like last year? What is your contingency plan if that's the case? In order to protect your company from risk and exposures, you got to have a more bulletproof plan, a better cost management plan that ensures your cash flow is always healthy, not no matter how many jobs you have in flight. And guess what? You'll make more money in the process simply by getting a better understanding of where you currently have profit leakage. You'll be able to recover some of that money you had been leaving on the table. So let's talk about how this translated to my company, Marathon Electrical Contractors. When I joined the team at Marathon, we had just begun, we were really kind of in the process of determining whether we wanted to use Procore. And up until that point, we were able to grow and see some profits, but the leadership team realized there's got to be something better. Labor was the biggest variable as to whether or not we made money on the job. And so we had to take a closer look at that, we felt like, to become more profitable. So what was our challenge? Well, first of all, we were only using 10 codes. So we couldn't get the level of detail we needed to understand our costs more intimately, which made it hard to pinpoint where the issues were stemming from or when we need to focus on our attention to make better decisions when we can actually make an impact, where we can actually make an impact. All of which resulted in poor management of our labor costs, thus leading us to losing money on jobs. It was all a trickle-down effect from us only using those 10 cost codes. Finally, after losing money on several jobs in a row, leadership said there has to be a better way to track our labor costs. For Procore, we were using spreadsheets to track labor costs, and if things went sideways, it was almost always too late to do something about it. Something that looked like this. Does it look familiar? It was a manual process to track labor costs. We were exposing ourselves to more human error, and as you know, every mistake has a cost associated. A little mistake could equate to a not so little loss for the business. So what did we do about it? First and foremost, as a leadership team, we decided to get Procore to better manage labor costs. I joined the company around this time when we decided to make the leap, so I was part of the action plan team, which consisted of myself, the COO, and 3 project team members that had different varying responsibilities and tenure to make sure that we had all our bases covered in setting up Procore right the first time. I highly recommend including your project team, including someone from the field. In this process, you have champions helping you push this forward. In terms of the actual transition, it took a good year to make the full transition. Something to keep in mind when setting expectations for the team. I like to think of this transition in 4 phases. First, we set up the account. We took 2 to 3 months to set up our cost codes and other pertinent pieces of information to firmly entrench Procore and have that detail set in place, including the integration with Sage. Second, we added all new projects in Procore and converted any projects that were only 10 or 15% complete. So there were some projects, the rest of the projects we just finished out the old way. But we were kind of migrated by using the new projects and having the new project set up on the new way. Third, we had an ongoing meetings, a couple of weeks, every 2 weeks, maybe once a month as we got later into the process, and continue to make adjustments and tweaks based on the feedback we were getting. It took time for us to tweak and adjust, learn and educate until we got into a good rhythm. We fell into that rhythm after about 12 months when we felt we made a full transition from the old way to the new way in Procore. For today's session, I want to focus on the first 2 to 3 month implementation and then the adjustments that came along, and then dive into details of what actually that looked like for us. When we set up our account, we determined that we only wanted cost codes set up in Sage and then push them over to Procore so that our accounting team could remain in control. So during implementation, we had converted to 10 cost code groupings with multiple cost codes within each grouping. But now we have over 100 cost codes. From the beginning, when we started adding new projects in Procore, we could set up all 100 plus cost codes, even if they weren't all needed at that point or for that project. Although there were grumblings from the team about too many cost codes, we really didn't think too much of it because we felt like this was the right approach. But then we decided to implement the timesheets tool and use that more effectively to get our productivity passing into the budget to manage our labor cost. At that point, we realized there was too many cost codes, because once you implemented that along with sub jobs and started having the project team try to filter through say you had 5 sub jobs and you had 100 plus cost codes on each job, you're talking about 500 plus cost codes, and you've got a field team trying to filter through that and pick which codes to use to put their time. That got us thinking during this adjustment phase, maybe we need to adjust how we approach this. So now what do? We set up 10 basic cost codes when we set up a job. And then we have the PMs give us a list of additional cost codes that they want us to set up. We have the PMs use a form in Excel to format a list of all possible codes with a checkbox next to each cost code. PMs check the box of the codes they want in Excel and then send it to somebody in accounting to set up the cost codes in Sage, which ultimately leads to getting set up in Procore. After the initial setup, the PMs can always email us later on if they want additional cost code set up. So it's not a static setup. This provides a more focused cost code list for each job and makes it easier for us to navigate in Procore when cost codes are being applied, and it reduces the opportunity for coding mistakes. This ties back to what Michelle said earlier about reducing human error. This is what we did to adjust for that. And through Procore system, we created the processes and procedures that allowed us to get better at collecting labor cost data in order to course correct in real time when we can actually make an impact on the outcome. In order to do this, the last piece of the puzzle, we leveraged the productivity budget view to see the financial impact of labor cost and productivity the moment a timesheet is submitted. With the cost codes, we're able to get granular information about where we're behind or ahead, so we can make decisions about where to focus our attention. Now let's take a look at how it works from end to end.
With Procore, the moment you enter time and production data from the field, it automatically updates the budget as dollars, so you can get real-time insight into project costs and productivity. Fill out a timesheet, track the material installed, and submit. Project managers and executives back in the office instantly see the labor productivity information they need to keep projects on schedule and on budget. They can identify at-risk scopes of work earlier and act fast to make decisions that protect budget and profitability.
With the help of Procore, we really doubled down on our cost management strategy, and we saw amazing results. There were many factors that led to this outcome, but we were able to double our bottom line without adding much more headcount and resources. So going back to my first slide, I would like to challenge you all to take another look at your cost management strategy and how you're maintaining healthy cash flow, because you might be leaving money on the table. And with that, I'll end with some best practices. First, don't set up your cost codes without talking to your PMs first. If you have cost codes they don't need, it can cause issues with miscoding. Miscoding can lead to bad data, and bad data is worse than no data at all. Second, restrict the cost codes. PMs can give a list before they set up a job of each cost code that they want. If they're unsure, they can add it later. But don't add just to add and then have to deal with deleting. It's just not an ideal situation. And then third, only set up codes as you're actively using them. That was something that we learned along the way. And for instance, if you're just in the first phase of a project, maybe you only set up the cost codes associated with that phase. And then when you move to the next phase of the project, set up those additional cost codes. And that way it limits the amount of choices that the field guys have and having to pick through all the various cost codes. So that's my tip for the day. Gabe, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Brad. That was a great presentation. Sounds like you and Marathon Electrical are up to great things. You know, similar to Brad, I joined the team once Procore was selected as our system of choice. In fact, my CFO, Ben, had already implemented Sage accounting and our cost code structure prior to me joining the team. So I've had the luxury of having most of our systems and processes already in place. Ben already built out a process over the previous 30 years to maximize cost codes and cost structure to help our teams get better at job costing. So for me, it's really simple. My task was to optimize what was already in place. And a huge part of that was getting Procore on board. To provide some context as to why solving for cash flow is so important to us, I'd like to share some background about our company, Dolan Concrete. Dolan is a labor forward company. So our primary service is place and finish structural concrete or site concrete work. We have minimal equipment, but maximum labor. Our workforce is everything. If we have a quality workforce, we're able to produce a quality product. So how does this translate to our cost management strategy, you might ask? Well, we need to ensure our field is taken care of all the time. They must get paid every week. This means funding their net paychecks and payroll tax liabilities for the employee and employer, and also the union contributions, because this is how they get their benefits through the trade work that they do. If we don't have a positive cash flow, then we won't be able to do that. But guess what? These are not negotiable items. Poor cash flow can result in poor payroll processes. For example, bounce checks. This can lead to poor morale, which could lead to poor quality of work, which ultimately can lead to reducing the quality of your brand. This is why we look to Procore to help us improve our cash management practices so our folks were taken care of. And yes, that's right. Me and the accounting team, we were the ones that really pushed to bring Procore on board. Procore's integration with Sage was the primary reason we looked at the product. So let's talk about what we actually did to improve our processes with Sage and Procore. Historically, and I'm sure many of you in the audience today can relate with this, you have your project teams on one side and the accounting teams on the other, and there's this division in the middle, right? And majority of that is because the project team is on one side managing their projects through their own internal servers, Excel spreadsheets, even paper or binders, just what they use to operate throughout their day. Meanwhile, us on the accounting side, we exist out of an accounting system. We exist out of the ERP. And for us at Dolan, that's Sage. So in order for either one of our teams to get information to make the best decisions, for example, for the project team to get information about their job costs, or for us in accounting to get information about cash flow, we would be asking each other questions all day long, either by phone, text, email, or a door knock, just to get some answers, sometimes waiting for hours or days, sometimes not getting an answer. I think of many of you in the audience today can agree that finance teams like ourselves, we're very protective over our financial information and the systems that we've put in place because there's very little room for error. So when we were in a situation where we wanted to give more visibility to our job sites, but also limit the access to protect the integrity of our data, this is what we did. We looked to Procore. We got in touch, and for me, the primary goal was getting Procore at Dolan was to bridge the gap between the PMs and the accounting team. Essentially, this makes my life easier, and it will make your life easier as well. And when you bridge this gap, you might ask how. Well, how is by putting in place a connected system that allows us to build and enforce processes and procedures to protect our bottom line. Let me give you an example. As you all know, as a specialty contractor or a subcontractor, we often have the least amount of leverage in terms of the hierarchy on a job site. You have the owners who have the most leverage, then there's the general contractor, and then there's a pool of specialty subcontractors like ourselves. So when there are these moments of leverage, we as specialty subcontractors, we need to capitalize on those. So let's talk about two similar scenarios with two very different outcomes. The first scenario I like to refer to as the blind yes. So we've been awarded a slab project. Our estimator bids that project by breaking it up into two different pours. Our general contractor client friend says, hey, we're a little behind, or we need to get ahead. Can you do this in one pour and actually do it over the weekend? In the blind yes scenario, we blindly agree. We send our team on site that Saturday. We do the pour, and the results, we've potentially wiped out our profit, lost money, or any one of those items. However, the client is happy and the employees are happy because they've been paid, but we're unhappy as the business because we have not. So let's compare this to the other scenario. Scenario 2 is what I like to call the protected yes. And the protected yes is the exact same slab project, the exact same bid, broken up into 2 pours, the exact same request from the general contractor to reduce that down to 1 pour. And in a protected yes scenario, we capitalize on that moment of the request. In that moment of the request, what we do is we deploy a work authorization, a PCO, a T&M tag, something that authorizes that work. It gets over to the contact that requested the work to be done on that day, and then we're off to the races. We could then show up on Saturday, do the pour, we can make a profit, and the bonus is we've made our client happy, we've made our employees happy, and as a business, we've made money. Now, this is where Procore comes into play. Because of Procore, we have a procedure to document these moments. It's standardized, it's clear, it's non-negotiable. This documentation gives us peace of mind. It allows us to say yes more often and keep our brand positive while still protecting our profits. Not only that, but Procore's mobile tools make this so easy for us and for our field team to participate in our operation. I'm sure you all are dealing with this, but we as a company have a hard time finding qualified, skilled trade workers. And for any of you in concrete, you know that the lack of apprenticeship, it makes it even harder for us to even do so. So if we are able to make our tradespeople's lives easier and ensure cash is flowing through the business, then it's a win-win-win all the way around. Let's see what it looks like in Procore now.
Fast track the documentation, verification, and change management of tickets for extra work. Procore's simple and intuitive mobile application captures labor, equipment, and material used in the field and automatically notifies your office team so that they can efficiently generate a change order. Obtaining signatures for extra work is easy. Get verification directly off your mobile device, or send a quick request for a remote signature with the click of a button. Automatic notifications for folks back in the office means no more time wasted chasing down paper tickets or following up with endless emails. This seamless workflow of tickets submitted enables your office teams to take immediate action on verified work, transferring quantities documented, applying contractual rates, and generating a change in a matter of minutes. Improve communication with your clients, increase efficiency across field and office teams, and get paid for work performed.
Now with Procore, I'm not having to recreate any of the data. Once it's in Procore, it's in Procore. In the past, all the information that was being typed into a document, email, or spreadsheet had to be retyped by me into the ERP. This is why I say this makes your life easier. With Sage integration, you can leverage all the cost codes that we have to make the transfer more seamless. In the past, in our legacy model, getting in sync was a certain moment in time. Now we're in sync in real time, so we're able to secure payment faster. Every change to the moment it happens is documented and put into the system. And once it's in the system, it becomes a financial moment for us. Now we can use that information to potentially build something, earn more profit, get more work, boost the brand. And what's great is the most of our clients use Procore. So there are never really any questions. We're speaking the same language through the platform. They know when it comes through Procore, it's an official request, and to move it through the billing process or whatever approval process it needs to go through. So no more email, no more Excel, just Procore. And what does this mean for us? It's sort of tangible results. For our project and accounting teams, we're waiting until month end to share information. But now our PMs and accounting teams are able to move to a weekly model, if not sometimes daily. This agility has had a significant impact on our cash flow. The faster we get information, the faster we can bill, the faster we get paid. And if any of you are thinking leveraging Procore to improve your cash flow, I'll leave you with some best practices. Ultimately, the best advice I can give you is to empower and educate your field team, because your systems are only valuable if you're actually getting data from the field. Technology is not a replacement for people. The better people that you have behind the technology, the better information you're going to yield out of that experience. So here's what we did at Dolan. At Dolan, we created a foreman class, quite literally a class. We brought in our foremen to in-person trainings and taught them basics from uploading photos to creating time cards to creating T&M tickets. That way they can learn this from us immediately. Second, we created a simple menu of items, set expectations that they need to submit these in Procore. We didn't want to overwhelm them, but we also wanted to motivate them. So we started with photos, time cards, extra events like PCOs or T&M tickets. Anything that was out of scope had to be reported. Lastly, we let them lead the way in terms of building on tools. As they get more comfortable with Procore, we expand their tool belt, identify more opportunities to optimize the system. And a couple more pieces of advice before I hand it back to Michelle. First, remember, this takes time. For us, honestly, we are in year 2 or 3, and we're barely hitting our stride with Procore and our cost management strategies. For anybody in the audience in finance, you might need to change your perspective. I think many of you are familiar with Procore as a project management tool, but it's honestly a fantastic tool for finance teams. It can be a missing piece in your cost management strategy. With that, I'll hand it back over to Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. I love that. And I obviously couldn't agree more. All right, folks, I'll close this out with one action item for you. Take a look at your cost management strategy and evaluate which of these 3 areas need the most attention. What can you put in place to build an even stronger strategy to ensure your cash flow stays positive no matter the things that are out of your control? And with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for everything you do to build a world around us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.